This is what, the 15th version of this dress? 17th? I have officially lost count. Having now sewn quite a bit of clothing for myself and having had years to actually wear that homemade wardrobe on a day-to-day basis, I've begun to see standout garments. The ones that I'm always reaching for, the ones that are always dirty because as soon as I wash them, I wear them again. So they basically don't even go in the closet. They just live on my chair pile of half-dirty clothes or on my body. So considering that I want to make clothes sometimes that I'm gonna wear a lot of times, I figured I'd remake 3 of my obvious favorites in a similar but probably ever so slightly different style. The hoodie dress, the comfy knit jumpsuit, and the pleated goddess gown. And then I was like, ugh, how are you gonna make a video out of that? You've already made all of those things in videos. So I figured that I would ask y'all if there were any specific questions that you have about the construction of those garments, any specific areas that you wanted me to show more or talk more about. I got way more replies to this post than I had anticipated. So many that I've decided to dump the pleated stripe illusion dress for now, or at least move it to its own video that will happen eventually. Because several people said they would love to see a woven fabric version of that dress. And you know what? So would I. I even already have the fabric for it. But I also really want another comfy knit version because I did end up passing on the black and gray one to my stepmom because she looked like a freaking queen in it. So I just have the pastel one now. If I'm gonna make 2 and answer questions, that's gotta be its own thing. So today we are just gonna do a hoodie dress and a comfy knit jumpsuit, and even narrowing it down to just those 2 things, I don't think I can answer every single question y'all asked. In fact, there are a few that I simply can't answer anyway, like I'm not capable of. So let's actually start with those. But before we really dive in here, let's take a snack break, because this video is sponsored by Wild Grain. Yay! Snack. Y'all probably know by now that Wild Grain is one of my favorite sponsors because bread is one of my favorite things in the whole world, and you know, Wild Grain, gimme bread. Wild Grain is the first ever Bake from Frozen subscription box for sourdough bread, fresh pastas, and artisanal pastries, and I am so excited every time one of these boxes lands on my doorstep, because it means fresh, warm goodness made with care and expertise can be baked and on my table within 25 minutes. The croissant loaf they sent me this time is actually fully baked in advance, so it takes less than 2 minutes to toast it, spread it with butter, and enjoy. Wild Grain partners with small bakers and pasta makers across the country to make these boxes possible. And they utilize sourdough fermentation in their goods, which is rich in nutrients and antioxidants and just easier on the belly. Their options are so varied and always changing with seasonal offerings, so you can get croissants for breakfast, sandwich bread for lunch, and a delicious pasta for dinner. All from Wild Grain. Don't forget dessert. They've also got options for those of us with dietary restrictions, including an entirely plant-based box. If you want to check out Wild Grain for yourself, then be sure to click the link in the description below and enter my code THESTITCHERY at checkout to get $30 off your first box, plus you'll get free croissants for life. Who says no to free croissants? Now let's get back to all of those questions that I can't answer, shall we? There were several requests for me to show how to size up the hoodie dress pattern, which is McCall's 7349 if you're new here. Welcome. Y'all, I wish I could do that. I wish that was information I could provide for you, but I simply can't. I have only ever sewn for my own body and my own size. I've never sized a pattern up. I barely know how to use patterns in the first place. If I tried to answer this question, the information would be entirely speculation and very likely incorrect. Sorry, and further sorries, that pattern brands can't just be frickin' size inclusive. If anyone knows of a more size inclusive pattern that is similar to this, I would say the basics are princess seams and raglan sleeves, then please do drop that in the comments. Someone else asked, can you make the jumpsuit more bathroom friendly, maybe in your split side style? No. I mean, I could, but that would make it an entirely different garment, and that's not the garment that I specifically wanted to make. A split-side jumpsuit is on my list, but honestly, it's not high on the list. Every time I make a jumpsuit, bathroom capabilities are brought up a lot. And here's the thing, if you don't like getting naked to pee, then maybe jumpsuits just aren't for you. The garment is what it is. I work from home and rarely leave the house, so I have no problem getting naked to pee. Ultimately, we should sew things that are gonna work best for our needs and our lifestyles, and jumpsuits just don't work for everyone, and that's okay. Someone asked sleeves, how do you nest them in a garment? And then someone else asked about patterning raglan sleeves. The hoodie dress raglan sleeves are part of the existing pattern. I've never self-drafted raglan sleeves, so I don't know how. And I left sleeves off the jumpsuit because I'm not particularly good at drafting set-in sleeves. So yeah, generally I don't have answers to sleeve-related questions. Give me like another 2 years of sewing and then check back. There were also many questions that I believe I've already answered in one of these videos. I'll put them all over the screen and they're all linked in the description. Like general sewing on knit advice, how to choose your fabric, which seams do you use where, how to do hemming. I gave about all I have to give on those topics. We will reiterate some of it here, but if you get to the end of this video and you're still having some questions, I recommend checking out some of those videos because the answers, or at least my version of answers for them, are probably there. Enough of questions that I can't answer though. Let's move on to stuff that I can answer, or at least, you know, give my opinion on. How do I decide which knit fabric to use for which garment? It's basically all about texture for me. I didn't bring my coffee with me. When I buy knit fabric nowadays, I touch it a lot, and I only buy it if I both like the feel of it and the look of it. It's gotta be the full package. But when it comes to choosing fabric for these two specific garments, there is a shared specificity. Length. Hello! Thank you. Someone said, I would love to know how you figured out with knit how much swish you can make it before it becomes too heavy and the fabric stretches too much. I tend to choose my fabrics assuming that I will be doing maximum swoosh. My limits in the swoosh world are usually due to the amount of fabric I have, not the type of fabric it is. This has not always worked out perfectly though, because I have learned things over time. The longer and or fuller a dress or the legs of a jumpsuit are, the more weight is pulling down on the entire top of the garment, all the way up to your shoulders. Knit fabrics can be comparatively heavy, and some of them are super thin. So I wouldn't recommend making either of these garments in a knit fabric that you can see through, like not fully see through, but you know, see your hand through when you hold it up with some light. Not only is that kind of fabric going to be very clingy and also quicker to wear down and fall apart, but also the weight from the length of the garment is gonna pull down on the top of the garment a lot and kind of distort the shape. These two dresses are probably the thinnest knits that I've used for this pattern, and because this one is short, the weight is not really a problem. It's not long enough to be heavy and pull down on the top. This one, however, is full length, and honestly, it's kind of too long for how thin the fabric is. Like when I hold this up, I can see straight through this. I can see the details of the room pretty clearly. This, I believe, is the first maxi length version of this dress I ever made though, so I didn't add any fullness like I did to many of my later versions, which does help with that weight. If you specifically want to use a thinner or less stable knit, then I would just recommend making the dress shorter or less full, or both. Same with the jumpsuit. I would do shorter legs, or even full-on shorts, which I guess now makes it a romper. You could then do a very light knit, and it wouldn't matter so much because you don't have the weight of that skirt or the pant legs yanking down on the bodice. So this hoodie dress is made with a thicker or more sturdy feeling knit, although it is still a four-way stretch. It's not a stable knit. I don't think I've ever made this dress with a stable or two-way stretch knit, although you absolutely could. You would just want to make sure that the direction that stretches is horizontal on all of your pattern pieces, not vertical, because you want the dress to stretch around you horizontally when you put it on, not stretch vertically. This jumpsuit, on the other hand, is made with that thinner version of knit that you can see through when you stretch. It's a fairly decent quality of that knit, so it doesn't feel like it's just gonna fall apart or something, but it's definitely not as stable as this orchid fabric. I originally left the hem on the pants super long just because it seemed like, I don't know, cozy comfy. And within a few weeks, I had ripped out most of the stitching from stepping on it. But then, story time, I wore this to Animal Kingdom when Matt and I were visiting Disney World over Christmas. And like, both of us have lived in Florida numerous times. I've worked at Disney World 3 times. We are usually prepared for the random middle of the day Florida thunderstorms that happen. But that day, for some reason, we just had not anticipated the rain whatsoever. So we get in line for Everest, the roller coaster, and it started to sprinkle, and we were like, it's fine, it's a little rain, we won't melt. And then as we sat down on the very front seats of this roller coaster, which is not one of their lovely indoor roller coasters, oh no, it started to downpour. Like Florida style downpour where each drop could fill a shot glass. And we went straight out into that face first, soaked in 2 seconds, rode the whole roller coaster in this pouring rain. We were laughing hysterically the whole time because it was like, what else can you do at this point? We're literally locked in. And then we spent the rest of the day soggy. And this jumpsuit, because it's that thinner material and the legs were already long and it was soaking wet, the legs got so long that they were fully wrapping under my feet in the front. So I had to just tie the legs up in knots around my knees so that I wouldn't keep walking on them. Anyway, thank you for indulging that tangent. When we got back home, I cut the legs off and hemmed them to a normal length. Overall, when it comes to choosing knit fabric for these 2 garments specifically, my advice would be, don't worry about it too much. Hold the fabric up to the light, give it a bit of a stretch, and if it's super stretchy or really thin, then maybe pass on it, or just use it for a shorter or lighter version of the garment. But as long as you like the texture of the fabric, I don't know that there's any specific knit material that I would say don't use for these garments. Keep in mind that what the knit is made out of is going to affect how warm it is. If it is a polyester knit, it's gonna be warmer because it's made of plastic. How thick it is as well. If you're gonna use like a sweatshirt material, that's gonna be pretty warm too, which might be what you want if you're making a hoodie dress for the winter and you actually live in a cold place, unlike me. Yeah, just there's stuff to keep in mind, but if I'm looking around at my collection of knit materials here, there's nothing I'm seeing that I'm like, oh, you definitely shouldn't use that kind of fabric to make one of these garments. It's just alter the garment to fit the fabric, or alter the fabric to fit the specific style of this garment that you want. I am planning to pretty much replicate this jumpsuit almost exactly as is. So I have this lovely tie-dye-ish blue knit. It's basically the exact same structural knit as the maroon one I used before. It's kind of thin, it's kind of see-through. It's okay. Somebody did ask if I could make the jumpsuit with shorter legs. I've done that before. I did that when I made the original one, and I just don't wear those versions as often. So again, I'm gonna make the versions of clothing that I am most likely to wear full-length legs. I don't make the legs super wide on this garment though, which is why I can get away with using a thinner knit like this. For the dress, y'all, I think I'm gonna make 2. Technically, only one of them is gonna be a hoodie dress. The other one is just gonna be the pattern without a hood. But I specifically wanted to try making a hoodie dress for summer, but then still like long, so I guess the only thing that makes it for summer would be no sleeves. I wanna use this rainbow stripe ribbed knit for it. And actually, this fabric is a little thinner than I would normally say is great for that full-length garment. But I want to try doing this one without any added fullness to the skirt. I'm usually expanding pattern pieces or adding godets and making that skirt bigger and swishier. But I don't know, something about the design that I have in my head, I actually might make it thinner than the pattern has it. So taking the fullness out of the skirt means that this fabric should be okay, even though it is a bit of a thinner knit. But the reason we're making 3 is that I remembered this whale fabric that I got from this really cool independent fabric store up in Michigan, I believe. Not that I went to the store, I don't think I've ever been to Michigan. I got it from their online store. They're called Seams Fabric, and I will put a link to their store in the description. This isn't sponsored or gifted or anything. I just wanted to shout them out because I really liked what they have to offer, and we need to support our small fabric stores right now. We need them as much as they need us. This fabric is so freaking cute, and I kind of did want another short version of this dress because I wear these so freaking much. So I thought I would combine this with this white material that I have that kind of reminds me of bubbles, and this is full on see-through on purpose. And then I could do a shorter version with sleeves and with godets, because I got a lot of questions about putting in godets, and that means we're covering as many bases as possible. Last little thing before we get to the actual making, somebody asked, is it possible to add trim or embroidery to stretchy knit fabrics? It is. I'm not super well versed in this area since I don't often use trim, but I know that there are stretchy trims out there. I believe I even have some of them. So you can definitely add trim to a garment made out of knit. Theoretically, you could even add non-stretch trim to a knit garment as long as you put it on a seam or an area that does not need to stretch. Like for example, your hemline doesn't usually need to stretch on a dress. It just sits there as it is. So you could easily throw some trim around that hem and it wouldn't affect anything really. You could also potentially add trim vertically down the seams of this dress, which could even give it more structure if you wanted that. Because again, the dress needs to stretch around you so you can put it on, but it does not need to stretch vertically. And with embroidery, kind of the same. You can embroider on knit materials by putting a non-stretch interfacing on the back while you work. But again, you'd want to make sure that you're not covering too much realty with that, because your stitches won't stretch. So you don't want to be removing stretch from an area that needs that stretch. But if I, for example, put like a little thing right here, losing stretch from that much fabric wouldn't affect the overall structure of the garment. On the other hand, I couldn't really embroider like the entire midsection of the dress, or I'd have some issues. I am anticipating that this is going to be a super long video. This is why I cut out the third garment. But let's finally get to some making. I'm gonna start with the rainbow stripe hoodie dress. There are 3 main areas that questions or requests covered for the hoodie dress, or since we're now making to what I will call the McCall's dress. Pockets, hood, and godets. Which makes sense, because those are the 3 things that are not on the original pattern. Oh, 4th thing, I suppose, finishing the neckline, changing the neckline questions in general. So for this first dress, we will have hood, neckline with hood, and pockets, inseam pockets. The second dress will have those godets, a neckline without a hood, and then I think I'll do a different style of pockets on there, like maybe the patch pocket style that I do a lot, because those are super simple. And I'll put chapters on this video. I never put chapters on videos, but I'll do it for you this time. I'm gonna start by cutting out all of my regular pattern pieces, like the ones that are just actually in this pattern, and I'm doing the long version with the no sleeves, or cap sleeves, I guess you could call them, because they do go slightly over the shoulder. General note, I use a size 14 on this pattern, and I'll put my basic measurements on the screen for you in case that helps place your own size. I'm not gonna cut out the neckline binding strip thing because we're sticking a hood on this, but otherwise, it's just according to pattern. Mostly. I did go ahead and remove some width from the side seams of the skirt, mainly because I wanted to play around with the direction of the stripes, and cutting things on the bias uses a lot of fabric. I also cut out 4 of the sleeve piece because I'm gonna double up each side. One, this gives some more structure and support. It's a great option for when you're using a thinner material. But 2, it just gives you a clean seam on the edge of your sleeve here rather than like a hem. And that's just a look I like, so we're gonna do that. And my pattern pieces are all cut out, so now I need my pockets. I have a basic method for adding inseam pockets to this dress, and at this point I kind of just stick with it. You're gonna need your side front panels. These right here. So first thing you want to figure out is how far down your pockets should start and end. And I've had a terrible habit in the past of putting pockets too low because I was putting my hand like, oh, here's where my hand would rest in a pocket. And then I would take the measurement from here. But where your hand rests in the pocket is not where it should start. You slide into that resting place, right? This one I believe is okay. Yeah, that's a pretty good placement. So my pocket starts right here and ends right here. This is easiest to measure from your armpit using that side seam, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, don't freak out about it being precise. It'll be okay. But measuring down from my armpit, I can see that a good pocket opening for me is like 11 inches. I could even go up to 10, I think, if I wanted. And if my hand is resting in my pocket about here, then that means my pocket needs to end about 20 inches down, making it overall a 10-inch pocket. Again, not super precise. I could do 10 inches, 11 inches, I could do 20 inches, I could drop it down to 22 inches. Doesn't matter that much. 10 inches is right where I started my little fold here. You can either just mark that or you can throw a pin in it. I already have a mark because I've done this so many times. And again, I already have a mark here, which is 23 inches down. So I'm just gonna go with that. And now the shape of your pocket is simply the shape of this panel from one measurement to the other one. You need 2 layers for each pocket, and I'm gonna use a different fabric, not really for any specific reason. It just matches the red on here, and I thought that'd be fun. Keep in mind if your fabric is a 2-way stretch or if it's way more stretchy in one direction than the other, you want the most stretchy direction to be horizontal, not vertical. If you have most of the stretch vertically, then that means when you put things in the pocket, you're going to have more sag. You can also use interfacing in various ways in these pockets to make them more supportive, and I have tried a couple ways in the past. I didn't personally like it. I didn't like the change of texture there, I guess, but you can absolutely play around with that. You don't need any extra seam allowance because this already has the seam allowance on it. So the only seam allowance you need is on the top and the bottom, and again, you can just kind of add that however much you want. Doesn't have to be precise. Now I can use pocket 1 to be a guide for pocket 2. And that's where the pockets will go. Adding the pockets is typically the first thing that I do when I'm sewing this dress together. You basically want to turn your front side panels into front side panels with pockets, and then construct the dress. I start by sewing together the top and bottom of 2 pocket layers. I'm using a straight stitch size 2 on my machine, regular thread, a stretch needle, and I am using my knit presser foot, although like I've talked about before, that is absolutely not necessary. These horizontal seams might be a time when you want to use a zigzag stitch, as the fabric can stretch a lot more in this direction, but that's really personal preference. It doesn't need to stretch, so we don't need to use a zigzag stitch. I'm leaving a seam allowance amount of space on either side unsewn so that the edges can still separate like so. Now I want to sew the pocket onto the side seam side of the side front panel, right side to right side, and with a smaller seam allowance than the normal one you'd use on this garment. So when I flip it over, the pocket is properly positioned inside the garment and open on that side seam line. If you're ever confused about which edge or which side gets sewn together, just put the pocket where it will be when the garment is actually constructed. Line it up on the inside of the garment, then flip the two edges that need to be sewn together and clip or pin them. I do this all the time to make sure I'm actually sewing the proper thing from the proper side in the proper way. Reverse engineering, you know? You can understitch along the inside of the pocket opening if you want, but you don't have to. I now need to attach the other side of the pocket to the side back panel, and I can sew the side seam together. So I'll pin the two pieces together carefully, starting at the top and making sure all my notches line up, so I'm sure I'm pinning the pocket to the correct place on that back panel. First, I just sew the pocket on, and then I can once again understitch if I please. Now I'll go back and sew the side seam together, always starting from the pocket and sewing outward, first up to the armpit. Then I'll decide how big I want my hand opening to be, mark that with a pin, and start there, sewing down to the hem. This way, if anything is slightly off or stretches as you sew, that excess material will be on an edge where you can cut it off, rather than creating a pucker or a pleat in the middle of your garment. Finally, I'll lay the pocket out on the inside of the front side panel and baste along that far edge. This will get sewn into the regular seam when we attach the center front panel, but I find it handy to go ahead and baste or stay stitch so it's not just flopping around. And yes, I pretty much always have a little extra overhang like that. It's all good, it happens. That is an inseam pocket on this dress. I'm gonna do the exact same thing to the other side, and then I can basically sew the rest of the dress together as the pattern instructs. Once that's done, we'll go on to the hood. The fun part about adding a hood is that you can indeed complete the entire garment first and then decide if you wanna. Everything is finished except the neckline, like hemming and all. The dress is done, except that one thing. Also, I super duper like it with the skinnier skirt. You know me, I love swish, but I was thinking kind of, I don't know, slip dress, statuesque. Something about this just made me think more of like a straight up and down sheath style, and it works. That's off topic. Back to hoods. So first of all, someone asked, I would like to see how you change the neckline on the dress to add a hood. I don't. You don't have to on this dress because it already has a crew neckline. We're just leaving off that binding strip, as I previously mentioned, because the hood is gonna be your binding. I do think the 3D curved nature of a hood is what makes it seem brain-boggling and honestly way more complicated than it actually is. I mean, I do recall being quite confused the first time, and then I realized that you can just fudge your way through with cheat codes. And it works. So get ready for the cheat code method, which is basically all my methods. I did not bring any tools out here with me. We're gonna focus on a two-piece hood just to narrow things down. So a hood is basically two pieces of this shape. This is the top of your head, that's the back of your head, this is the opening where your face goes through, and this is the edge that's attached to your neckline. You generally want to line a hood, make it 2 layers. You don't have to, but I will say the first time I made a hood and I didn't line it, I ended up regretting it, so I recommend it. And I'm gonna line mine with the same fabric I used for my pockets, because a little bit of contrast is fun. Basic measurements. Measure up from your shoulder, or from the nape of your neck if you can, to the top of your head. Then add a couple inches, because hoods usually aren't tight to your skull. That's this measurement, and the longer you make it, the more flop you're gonna get here on the sides of the hood, which might be something you like, it's something I like. Measure from the back of your head to the front of your head, or you could also measure your head around and do the math to get the diameter. Again, you're gonna add a few inches, so it doesn't have to be super precise. Leave yourself room for a ponytail in the back, let it flop a bit, go bigger. That gives us essentially a square. Now we can kind of curve the front inward just because it falls a little better then, but you don't have to. And then we curve the back because heads are curved, but again, you don't have to. If you leave it square, you'll have a little pointed hood, or you can draw that point outward and get a super pointed hood, like the one I put on my Snow Queen dress. Last measurement we need, and I'm guessing the one that confuses people, the part that we attach to the neckline. You can measure your neckline, usually by folding your garment in half from the front and the back center, not in half shoulder to shoulder, because your back neckline and your front neckline are not the same lengths. Or you can just measure the entire neckline and then divide it in half. Then you can create the curve for the bottom of your hood to match that measurement. An easy way to do this is to take your desired measurement and cut either a piece of wire or just a piece of string or yarn that's that length. Then you can lay that out in your desired curve. Or you can just go the easy way, which is to make it bigger. And this is pretty much what I do without fail now. I cut this line however long I freaking feel like, although, you know, don't go too crazy. And then I have two methods for making it fit my neckline. The first is to evenly remove width from the back, usually right about here, by either gathering or pleating. You add a pleat or a little section of gathers on either side of the center seam, line up the front of your hood with the front center of your neckline, and adjust until everything fits. The second option turned into a design choice that people ask me about all the time. You just overlap the ends. You get this look then, and you don't have to measure precisely. Woo! You can add seam allowances if you want, or just make everything bigger. Like, generally speaking, y'all, just go nuts. It's really hard to mess up a hood, especially if you're doing cheat code methods. Once you have your outer pieces, use that as a guide to do your lining pieces so that they are exactly the same. That is something you definitely want. That was the cutting outside of things. For the attaching side of things, or the putting together, I use another cheat code. So normally when you're attaching a two-sided thing to a single piece of fabric, you would sew one side on right side to right side, you fold it over. This is not going to end well. My fingers can't do all of the movements. And then the other side comes around and gets like top stitched or stitched in the ditch to attach it, right? That can get really tricky when you combine stretch fabric and the curves of a neckline and a hood. I tried it once. I hated the process. Stuff ended up being pulled weird, and then like the lining and the hood weren't perfectly together because some of it had been stretched more than others. And it's like, why put yourself through that when you can just do an easier method that works exactly the same on the outside of the garment and it doesn't matter on the inside, because nobody should be looking at the inside of your clothes. So basic construction, you sew together your two pieces of the outer and your two pieces of the inner parts of the hood. This seam right here. So we have hood number 1 and hood number 2. Now you put the lining and the outer hood together, right side to right side, and you're sewing all the way around this seam. This seam, yeah? I recommend starting from the center each time. Go from your center seam out, then come back, go from your center seam out the other way. Now, you can take this opportunity to sew literally around this entire thing. This is my cheat code. You can sew the whole hood together like you would a pillow covering, just leaving yourself a small enough hole to turn it right side out. And that means when you go to attach it to the dress, there's nothing that can separate and move around. The hood is finished. It is a finished piece. You can also, and this is what I'm gonna do this time, just sew that face opening together, turn it right side out. You can do top stitching if you want to make it look nice, and then just baste or stay stitch these two edges here on the bottom. This will put less bulk in the neckline area, which I think is something that somebody asked, how to keep it from being bulky. I'll be honest, I've done both methods, and if you completely finish the edges, you of course have 4 layers of fabric there from where it's been turned. And if you don't finish the edges and you just baste them, you only have 2. I have not noticed a feeling of bulkiness from either option when I actually wear the garment. It would really be up to you whether you can feel the bulkiness of that seam, and it might have something to do with your fabric type as well. I'm gonna do the only 2 layers option this time because it's a thinner, lighter dress. And considering I don't finish my seam edges anywhere in my knit clothing, it's literally no different. All right, so I can turn this right side out now, and we have a single hood. I'm gonna go ahead and top stitch around the edge. It looks nice. This is my method of making sure the lining and the outer are sitting together nicely. You just put your hand in there and shake. Let gravity do the work for you. So now I'm gonna baste all the way around this bottom edge right here. Again, going from the center outward. And now we can attach it to the neckline of the dress. So I'm gonna find my center back first, because we don't have a center back seam. Not super concerned about my center front, because I'm gonna be doing the overlapping method. And then you're basically just sewing it on. Again, start from the center, sew one entire side on first, and then do the other side. Y'all, I promise I did not measure this, but sometimes when you don't measure things, they just end up lining up perfectly anyway. Literally perfect, no overlap. Did not measure that. I was fully expecting them to overlap. Woo! Then you can flip the whole thing up and top stitch all of that seam allowance to the inside of the garment. And that's about it. Okay, that is the summer hoodie dress done. It is exactly what I wanted it to be. So yeah, my secret to hoods, just make everything bigger and then make it fit. And sometimes you get super lucky and it fits perfectly without you even trying. And if you don't, then you overlap them and everybody tells you, wow, that looks so cool, what a great design choice. And you're like, yeah, design choice. Seriously though, hoods are so much less complicated than they seem. Let's move on to the whale dress. We're back to pockets. Once again, I've already cut out everything that I need for the dress. Basically, according to pattern, I did do my normal slight flaring of each piece to make the skirt even fuller. Also on the sleeves, I decided I'd like loose sleeves, kind of like the one I was wearing yesterday. So I just cut them a little bit bigger than the pattern. So to add patch pockets, we once again need our side front pieces here. And we only need 2 layers of fabric here, 1 for each pocket, because it's just getting sewn onto this piece of the dress. Once again, you would want to decide where the pocket is going to start and where it's going to end, therefore how long it is, and then you can mark that on your panel itself. The reason I say to measure this from your armpit down is because when I first made this dress, I think I made this mistake one time. I just automatically was like, oh, I'll measure from the top of my shoulder. Where should my pocket start? But this piece of the pattern doesn't go to your shoulder, obviously. I just wasn't thinking about it at the time. It only comes to right here, which is a really random spot if you're not already conveniently wearing the exact same dress. So under your armpit is a pretty safe place to measure from. You might be like half an inch off, but that doesn't matter that much. So patch pockets, I like to start a little bit lower. I think about 12 inches down on me, and then I'll just make them however long I want. Because I don't really rest my hands in patch pockets, so, you know, it doesn't matter that much. So there's my 12-inch mark. That's where the pocket is going to start. I can end it wherever I want, and then you don't add any seam allowance on this side, because just like with the other pockets, it's going to be attached on this side via the side seams you already sew. The only seam allowance you need is on the bottom, because that part's going to be flipped under, and then you need like a hemming seam allowance on the top, so you can roll it under twice and give it a nice hemline there. I usually give myself a lot up top, or as much as I can, because I like kind of a nice thick top on a pocket rather than like a skinny one, but it is really just personal preference. Do I care about pattern matching? I think we all know the answer. No, I do not. It can be helpful to go ahead and do that fold before you cut this out, because then when you unfold this right here, it'll be the, it makes a certain angle that folds up perfectly. And I can do the same with the bottom. Go ahead and fold it under. And then we're just cutting down the sides to make it exactly match the panel of the dress. So now that is our first patch pocket, and we can just use this as a guide to cut out the second one. Just remember the pattern piece is not symmetrical, so you need to do it the opposite way. In other words, right side to right side or wrong side to wrong side when you're cutting it out. First thing we're gonna do is hem the top, so I'm folding it twice and sewing it down. Again, if your fabric is really stretchy in this horizontal direction, this is a good time to whip out that zigzag stitch, but mine is a fairly sturdy material, so the straight stitch works perfectly fine. To attach these pockets, we lay them right side to right side on that front side panel. As with the inseam pockets, you can start by lining it up where it will be once finished, turn that edge under, and then flip it downward. Easiest way to make sure you're getting it in the right place, if you ask me. Stitch along that edge, and then we fold it up. You can top stitch here for extra strength and support if you feel like it, but you don't have to. And then we just have to baste the edges down, and that's it. The pocket is attached, and when we sew the rest of the panels together, they'll be secured in those princess seams. Did I mention how easy the patch pocket style is on this dress? It's so easy. I love it. I want to add godets to this dress with the white material, cause yay for more swoosh. I have plenty of fabric here, so I'm gonna add a triangle shape in between every single seam of this dress, so 6 total. However, as you may have noticed, it is a see-through material. I want those godets to start below the flashing point. I'm gonna measure from about where my crew neck would start. Again, it doesn't have to be precise. If you're off by an inch, a centimeter, not that big of a deal. And just measure down to where would be a safe place to start the top of the triangles. About 28, 29 inches on me. Then I can take that same measurement, 28 inches, and see what's left from there to the hem. For me, that's about 14 inches. So this is definitely going to be more of a whoosh at the bottom kind of godet addition here. You can do them as high as you want. So like this dress, for example, is full length and the godets start about mid-thigh. I've done them all the way up so they start with the slope of the dress. That works for a great big full skirt. It looks amazing. But you can add these any which way you want. You could add them like just in the back and have more fullness there. Play around with it, have some fun. What did I say? 14. How wide you want your triangles to go? Do whatever you want. You know, obviously at some point it's gonna get a little bit ridiculous. Don't forget to add seam allowance to whatever your measurement is. 14 was my normal measurement, so I need to do, you know, 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance around that. And it's easier to cut a triangle on the fold and just cut one side of the triangle and then fold it open. The diagonal measurement of the triangle should be the same as the center height, 14 inches for me, and that's how you get the curve of the bottom, which I did not do, so like don't pay attention to what I'm cutting out there. I tend to not bother and just cut a straight line and then trim off the wonky bits after I sew the whole thing together. Also an option. So I've got my 6 triangles, I have all of my panels. Here's a trick I've learned about godets. It is easier to sew them in before you sew the dress together or the panels together. Like I used to think that I could sew the whole top of the dress together and just stop where I wanted that godet to start and then add the triangle in. And I've discovered that that is way harder, in my opinion at least. Pick a panel, any panel, and measure up from the hem the length that your godets should be. Maybe not the length that they are if you cut them out really wonkily as I usually do, but the length of your original measurement, which was 14 inches for me. Line up your triangle right side to right side and sew it down top to bottom. Remember that the tip of your triangle is seam allowance, not the actual piece, so you don't want to attach that. If it helps you remember where your real godet, as in the part that will be visible, starts, actually measure your seam allowance up from that tip and cut off the extra. Now we line up the adjacent panel and I pin them together from the top, matching all the notches even though we aren't gonna sew that yet. Just like with the inseam pockets, I wanna make sure I'm attaching the godet at exactly the right spot. I thoroughly pin the other side of the godet onto this panel and then again sew it down from the top to the hemline. When I put it under the foot, I'm making sure that my needle is starting exactly where my last seam ended. This is how you get a clean point to that godet. The last thing we do is attach the rest of the seam between those two panels. And as before, we want to be sewing away from the point where our 3 seams will meet up. So as I put it under the pressure foot, I'm lining it up with that previous seam, just like we did the last time, but I'm also pulling the godet itself out of the way towards what would be the inside of the dress, because otherwise I'll end up sewing over it, yeah? The key here is really just a bit of patience when it comes to lining everything up, pinning a lot, and then starting your seam at exactly the proper place. Sometimes the stitching on one side will be perfectly lined up, but the stitching on the other side will have a slight discrepancy. You can just check from the outside if this has led to any holes, and if you want or need to, just stitch a little section from the other side to connect those 2 seams. But that gives us this lovely godet with a nice pointed top. I'm going to repeat that process for all the other triangles and then finish sewing the dress together, and then we'll talk about that neckline. Ooh, that was a lot of top stitching. So the last thing that we need on this dress to completely finish it is the neck binding, and I did get a lot of questions about this, but honestly, I'm not gonna go into a huge amount of detail for 2 reasons. One, if you just wanna do the regular neck binding on the crew neck, the pattern does have instructions for that. 2, if you wanna do something different, I'm not really the person to ask for advice about that. Similar to sleeves, maybe a little better than sleeves, I'm not actually that good at neck bindings. I just don't care that much that I'm not that good. So if you want to change this neckline into a V-neck, a scoop neck, anything like that, the easiest way I find is just to cut it out like normal first and sew the whole dress together like this, just leaving off the neck binding, and then line it up front to back, like so. Like you want to line up your seams so it's all perfectly a cross section. Then you can cut down your neckline into whatever you want it to be. The amount of binding that you'll need is going to change if you change the neckline. If you want to do a V-neck, the split of the binding is put in the front instead of in the back. And I will try to find the video that I originally used to learn how to bind a V-neck. I've never done it super well. If you get really up close to every V-neck I've ever done, it's a little wonky. And that's okay. Like, no one's really looking that close at your garments. Garments you buy in the store are also a little wonky. I will say one massive thing I recommend when doing necklines is basting. And I need to listen to my own advice because I forget to baste all the time. But just baste it on the first time and then check and see if it's loose enough, tight enough, perfect enough, good enough, and then sew it down for real. Because honestly, I usually have to rip it off and adjust things and sew it back on 2 to 5 times. But if you just want to stick with the original neckline that the pattern has, it does give you instructions and it does give you a pre-made pattern piece that should theoretically be the right size. If it's a really stretchy kind of knit, that may differ. So again, baste. Guess how many times I had to do the neck binding? 3? Yeah, 3. I love it. The fabric is so cute. Nice pockets, very deep. The sleeves did not end up as like bell-shaped as I thought I was making them, but that is because I was not paying attention. And I'm pretty happy with this. They're just like not tight around the arm at all, which I like. And that is all for the McCall's pattern. Let's switch gears and do the jumpsuit. Someone asked, how do you draft the armholes from scratch? Poorly. The reason that I want to remake this jumpsuit, other than just wanting another one because I wear this one so freaking much, is because I actually messed up on the armholes. They're way too small, which means they go like right up into my armpit. Interestingly, this does not annoy me texturally, I guess. Like, the feeling of it does not bother me at all, which is why I still wear it all the time. But it is kind of making the fabric gross. So that right there is deodorant buildup in the fabric. So like, it's not disgusting, it's not nasty, but it's just so much deodorant that it won't wash out because it's been living in my armpit. So still kind of ew. Otherwise, this is pretty much perfect. I love it as is. So the goal here is to just make another one with slightly bigger armholes. Someone else asked, how do you get the swoosh in the jumpsuit while still having a somewhat fitted waist? With pants, you don't have to do a whole lot to get the legs looking swooshy. Like on dresses, I'm forever angling those sides out more and more to get this massive skirt. But with pants, even if you just do a straight line down from your waistline and crotch seam, that's already a pretty big leg. If you want it even wider, you just start to angle those lines outward. Though I would recommend angling the side seam here more than you angle the inseam, because if you do them equally, you'll end up with a lot of fabric between your legs, which can just be kind of unpleasant to wear. But regardless of how much you angle the pant leg out, you're doing it below the waistline, so it doesn't affect the size of your waist. You're not making the entire garment bigger, you're just sloping those pants out. And you could even play around with altering where that slope starts. If you start it kind of up at the top, you're getting these big sort of palazzo pants legs, but you could also slope them from the mid-thigh, you could slope them from the knee, you could slope them from the mid-calf area, and you'll get different looks to your pant legs accordingly. Other than that, most of the requests when it came to the jumpsuit were just to show diagrams of the shape, to show the measurements that I use, math. So, I'll do my best. I made the original one in 4 pieces, not counting the pockets or binding, but you could also make it in 2, theoretically, assuming you have enough fabric to get this piece onto it. The first measurement you want is the overall height. This starts from the top of your shoulder and goes to wherever you want your hemline to fall. Keep in mind that knit stretches under its own weight, so you'll probably need a few fewer inches of fabric than what this measurement actually is. Next, you want to know where the inseam should fall, or the, crotch. So again, measure from the shoulder to the underbutt. Remember, once again, you're using a stretchy fabric, so nothing has to be incredibly precise. The garment is loose and flowy and comfy, not tight to your body. You'll also need your 3 traditional around the body measurements: bust, waist, and hips. It's often easiest for me to start with a rectangle in my head and then cut that down into the shape of the pattern piece, like sculpting from a block of marble. That makes it sound very fancy. The rectangle in this instance is the complete height measurement by 1/4 of the largest around the body measurement, whichever one that is for you. For me, it's the hips. You can also add 1 or 2 inches to this width if you want your garment to be even looser and flowier. I usually want it to just casually fall over my widest measurement. I'm gonna take the 10.5 inches up to 11. I do think some people often want very specific information when it comes to accommodating the stretch of your fabric or taking that into consideration. But y'all, everyone's knit fabric is gonna be different. Everyone's fabric is gonna stretch to different amounts. So you really do just have to play around with it a bit on your own. Wrap the fabric around you in a tube so it hangs the way that you want it to, however tight or loose, and then then measure how much fabric that was and compare it to your actual body measurement. 'Tis all just semi-scientific experimentation. Anyway, now we can start cutting down our rectangle. I'll mark that underbutt measurement, removing a couple inches here because the vertical stretch of the material will absolutely affect where the crotch seam falls. I'll mark a line where my next largest horizontal measurement is, for me, the bust, and then I'm not even going to bother with my waist measurement because I don't want the garment to be tight around the waist. I can measure down from my shoulder to decide where I want my neckline to fall. Safe to say we're doing the front of the garment right now, but this also applies to the back as well. And then I can measure down from the shoulder to see where my armhole should start. From there, I just start connecting the dots, or the lines, until we have an outline of the pattern piece. I do often use my wire crotch mold thing to create the curve here, but again, we're using a stretch material, so you don't have to be super precise. Remember, the back piece will have a larger curve to accommodate the bootay, and you can guesstimate that curve on either side of the body by taking a piece of cord, holding it up to your shoulder, marking where the curve should begin, and then cutting it off at the midpoint, where all of those seams will meet in the crotch. Then just lay that out on the fabric and pin your line in place. Easy peasy. Don't forget, I'm saying this so many times, to take the stretch of your fabric into consideration. If you don't want saggy crotch, you'll probably need to remove a couple inches off the top so the whole thing is a bit raised. When it comes to the armholes, I kind of always thought there was some precise way you had to cut them, but if you aren't adding sleeves, meh. The reason they ended up too small on my last one was because I forgot how adding the binding makes the armhole both smaller and more cinched in. I tried it on without the binding, decided it was good, and then didn't double check after adding it, and I was too lazy to redo it. You can try the string thing again here. Wrap a piece of string around the shoulder and arm where your armhole will be to get an overall length. Use half of it for each side of the pattern piece. But honestly, I prefer to just wing it, cutting a smaller hole than I'll probably want, and then adjusting it to a larger hole once I've sewn the garment together and tried it on. Just, you know, remember the effects of binding. Don't forget to add seam allowances before cutting it out, and for the back piece, you're essentially doing the same thing. Here's all my measurements. Hopefully this helps. The crotch curve should be bigger because it's going over the booty. The neck is generally higher, but doesn't have to be. You can shape the armholes differently if you want, but overall it's the same concept. I usually just place my front pieces on top of the new section of fabric and use that as a guide, adjusting only the areas that actually need it. Hopefully that was all helpful. I know my descriptions of self-drafted garments can be a bit smudgy, but that's because everything I do is smudgy and it still turns out okay. I cannot stress enough how much it is just trial and error and going for it. It's stretch fabric, it's a loose, comfy garment. Precision is not key here. Also, you'll notice I did not cut out the binding yet. I did cut out some pockets off camera, but I just wait until I've sewn the whole garment together and then I can get final measurements of things. If I change the size of the neck hole, change the size of the armholes, then I cut out my binding. And as I talked about on the last dress, I'm still not very good at binding things and getting it right, so it really is just a process of basting it and then ripping it out and then doing it again until you get it right. Otherwise, sewing this garment together is incredibly easy. If you did pockets of any kind, do your pockets first, and then it's just shoulder seams, side seams, and inseam. Someone did ask how I stabilize the pockets on my jumpsuit. I don't. They're saggy, they're stretchy. I'm fine with it. Last thing I would say about putting this garment together is just remember when hemming it, if you hem it so it's brushing the ground on day 1, then on day 3, or if it's lightly wet for some reason, or if you put your phone in your saggy pocket, you're gonna be stepping on that hem. So just keep that in mind. Maybe make it a little bit shorter. Also, it's worth noting here that I still made adjustments after sewing this together. I took up the shoulders by an inch or so, I took in the very top of the side seams here, and then I accidentally adjusted the inseam, or you know, the crotch height, in the wrong direction, leading to a very saggy crotch. Whoops! Oh baby, we are done! Even spread over 3 days, I do feel like that was an insane amount of talking, but I always feel that way when I'm like trying to give directions. It's hard! I was able to fix the saggy crotch on this. One great thing about making very wide legs is you have room to re-sew your inseam higher and redo all of that. Also, this might be some of the best binding I have done yet, and I got it on kind of the first try. I actually put the neck binding and one of the arm bindings on, and then I was like, you should try this on again. Remember what happened last time? And yeah, all of the holes were too small and too tight, so I had to cut everything a little bit bigger. Observe how it's not right up in my armpit this time. Great. So, first try the second time I did the binding. That's something. Look, overall, if there is one virtual mental gift that I could give to you, it is the ability to not be afraid of making mistakes. So often in the questions that I'll get, I can just sense this extreme fear of messing up. And you gotta get past that. I know that it can feel like you've wasted time and or resources if the final thing is not perfect. But first of all, you've never wasted time if you learned something. And second of all, you usually haven't wasted resources either, because a garment is still usable and wearable even if it contains mistakes. It doesn't have to be perfect for you to love it and wear it. 90 to 100% of my handmade wardrobe that I wear almost every day at this point contains mistakes. So, make mistakes. Get messy. That's the Miss Frizzle thing, isn't it? I've officially turned into Miss Frizzle. I'm okay with that. Oh, it's a sneezing day. Why? Oh, that's still zoomed in. Oh good, the yard work just got noisier. Did I just wipe coffee on my dress as though I'd not a care in the world? Yeah. There were several requests. What? Hello? Hello? Oh my baby.